We really weren't trying to make the Halo series into an investment game. We weren't trying to make it be about, earning experience and unlocking things. I think you can argue that the genre has sort of moved on past then. It's kind of hard to find a shooter these days that doesn't have a strong investment component. We're not taking credit for any sort of sudden inspiration. We're like, oh my God, we got to get out ahead of the industry. If anything, we were slow. The reason why we're approaching the investment game this time around is to give the game more temporal stickiness, because that's good for a social game. If you have a game that people play for 8 hours or 15 hours or even 20 or 30 hours, but then they stop playing, then you don't really have time for a community to form up around that. You don't have time for friends to stick. We did this thing on Halo 3 where we added a set of achievements to the end of the game that were really hard, and they unlocked the recon armor, which was really coveted in the community. So you have these two elements right away. One is that it's challenging. Two is that it was cooperative. But three is that it was for something that was really coveted. People wanted this thing. That Vidmaster challenge was so successful and so popular among people who played it. People went out there and they had a really good time trying to overcome this challenge. And we looked at it and we said, this is a need that is not being met. If you look at the cooperative shooter genre right now, it's really kind of thin. Yeah, so Borderlands was really interesting. I played the first Borderlands an awful lot, and I think Borderlands spent a lot more effort on creating very, very many possibilities of items in their sandbox combat space. And as the kind of player who really likes the numbers and who likes the nuts and bolts and thrashing out the mechanics, that was really entertaining. I really enjoyed that part of it. But I think that they spent too much effort on that and not enough effort on, well, what do you use those things for? The combat wasn't really super engaging beyond a certain point, and there wasn't really a lot of stuff to do at the end, and there was no strong multiplayer component. So I think we're sort of looking at that and saying, hey, well, what's important to us? Strong gameplay, strong activities, things to do. Well, how do we support that with an investment game? And I think that means less randomly generated stuff, less just constant bombardment of items. I think our approach to the loot that you get in the game is very much more, if something drops and you don't care about it, we should take that out of the game. We want to have, I think, a lower frequency of drops than you'd see in sort of a typical ARPG, but the individual drops are a little bit more interesting, a little bit more meaningful to you. Our drops are per player, so there's no mad rush to be the first person to pick up everything. There's no ninja looting. When you see an item that drops for you, there's systems that are hopefully working successfully to make sure that that item's actually going to be worth looking at. We're going in a little bit different direction than some other recent RPGs where they really never ask the player to make any commitments. We want players to actually do some things that they may be locked into, at least for some period of time, because we feel like that allows a person to actually make a different decision than another person and not to just immediately copy the decision that's optimal. Everyone doesn't just go to a website and say, well, what's the best build? We're trying to give people opportunities to distinguish themselves. Commitment is part of that, because when nobody's committed to anything, nobody's distinct either. Everyone's really only a few button clicks away from being the same as each other. There's really no wrong way to build a character in Destiny. There's nothing in there which is saying, nope, you made the wrong decision and you should be anxious about any of the decisions you make. And that's the thing that I think the industry said, oh, every decision makes you anxious, so we got to do away with decisions. Just get rid of those, move those out of the game. I think that's a wrong decision. The thing is, first and foremost, we're a studio full of gamers, right? We play games when they come out and we get really excited about them. There's people here in the studio who, when Monster Hunter came out recently on the Wii, they were just completely into it and sitting and listening to them as they're relating their tales. It's something you can almost play vicariously. You get really excited about listening to them talk about that stuff and wanting to jump into it. I think one of the recent real big hits in the studio is playing Dark Souls, right? Dark Souls came out and here's a game that is not very cooperative friendly. It makes it really quite challenging to even get into a game with your friends. One of the biggest threads we've ever had here at Bungie was about Dark Souls, because it was just this one long running social experience where all these people trying to figure out how to play this game in this asynchronous social experience. It was absolutely wonderful. It was fantastic. It made the Dark Souls experience so much better because you're essentially playing it in a virtual co-op mode. The notion that the game is not just a completely open book that's spoon-fed to you in little nibbles of baby food. It's something that we really appreciate, and we're like, hey, Destiny should have a little bit more of that like actual depth, where there's mechanics in there which you don't realize right away, but you figure those things out, and then once you realize what's going on, you can take advantage of those things and be a stronger player. We're building lots of encounters and even activities where it's not immediately obvious what you should do, and in fact, you're gonna fail. Oh my God, you're actually gonna play a AAA video game and fail a lot. When we say that we're building something for every mood, we really mean it. We're building some things that are easy to just ease yourself into after a hard day at work. I think a good example of something like that would be, playing through some of our story missions, like playing through the campaign, unlocking different parts of the story. Those are meant to be accessible. Those are meant to be something that you can just sort of sit back and play it as it comes. I'm most excited for fans to dive into the community. I'm excited about people who normally play games on their own being in a game with other people, that sometimes they can bail that dude out who is about to get killed by that fallen captain, and sometimes they'll be backed into a corner and a rocket will come in and like smash aside that Hive Knight and save the day, and they're like, wow, this is kind of different than how I've normally played. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to support those encounters, those moments of interaction between people, whether it's with a circle of friends or with strangers that you meet in a public bubble. Those are all totally valid, totally exciting experiences for us.